Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's UFC post show coming off of UFC 302 from The Rock on Saturday night, Newark, New Jersey, the backup location for this year's Republican National Convention, where Donald Trump made his triumphant return 48 hours removed from 34 charges laid against him. Here to join us, he is your favorite felon, Eric Marcotte, who is here with us. Hello, Eric.
Hello, John. Always happy to talk about these Republican National Conventions with you.
Yes. At what point of this show of a UFC card do you sit down and you just absorb everything and you say, "How did I find myself into this sport?"
Before I start at this point, I know what I'm getting into. I know what I'm sitting down to watch. I know what these crowds are here for, and it is not for the fighting anymore.
Yes, it is. We say it in jest, but there is such a gigantic element of politics that are now so invested in these UFC cards that a Donald Trump looking at what's a great media opportunity for me where I'm going to go into a building where I'm going to be soundly received in a positive fashion. And it was a no-brainer. Like we talked about it on Friday night, that there was a possibility that it would make sense for them to do it. And they did it. And I mean, as Dana White said at the press conference, do you think he regretted doing it? Not at all. Like, for him to have a whole crowd chanting your name, F Joe Biden, like a great win if you're a Donald Trump strategist.
Oh, he's never gonna get as hardcore as his fan base can be. The UFC Trump crossover fan base. These are the biggest Trump supporters of them all, and he was treated like a hero on this show, not just from the crowd, but also from the fighters, the broadcasters. Like, this is such a positive move for his campaign in my eyes.
Yeah, and as I said on Friday, I would expect throughout this is going to be a close race, and I don't think the UFC involvement and integration is going to be. I mean, it's not going to be tipping the scales, but I do feel we're going to see plenty of Donald Trump at these shows in the lead up to November and just kind of engaging that audience that are going to be younger by demographics as well. Like it does make a whole lot of strategic sense from Donald Trump. I would love to know this guy's thoughts on that Darce setup in the main event as well, and how Islam was able to transition to it. And maybe we will get a Donald Trump breakdown at some point if he launches his own YouTube channel.
I was absolutely shocked that he actually made it to the end of this card, because he is a very old man, and this was a long night of unexciting fights.
Guy falls asleep during his own court proceedings, but seemed to be wide awake for this card. That up until that main event, like, Dana White was very polite at the press conference if you didn't hear it. And the most he would say about it was, "Yeah, man, this crowd was great. They were waiting for something to happen." And then we got to I think if you took out that main event, I think you would have got more salty Dana White at the press conference, because we had 12 fights on this card, 9 going the distance. And I'm not one that just says, oh, if it's a rash of decisions, that equals boring card. But man, there were some not great fights on this card, but they were trumped by, pardon the pun, some of the scorecards that got turned in on this show, which were perplexing to say the least. Up to and including a 49-46 card for Paulo Costa. I mean, this was a night of just in all your issues that you might have with the UFC product. It came to a head. Brand new gloves, and it felt like we got more eye pokes than ever. Constant criticizing about the judging, and you got some ammo if you are opposed to some of the judging criteria. It had everything, Eric.
The biggest stars in this card were Donald Trump, the new gloves, and the judges. These were the stories of this card that did feature some of the biggest stars in the sport.
So, I mean, how much did you look at this main event in terms? It seemed like this. I can't remember a main event where a lot of people, I think, were voting with their heart with Dustin Poirier. Not to say that I disagree, or I will say not that I agreed with how wide the odds were, but I was definitely favoring Islam going into this fight. And I think that it played out. If you were to ask people just using your head, this plays out in kind of similar fashion, maybe going later in the fight than you would have anticipated. But how much stock did you put in Dustin Poirier being able to pull this off, which would have been right up there among the great moments in UFC history if he were able to win this title right at the tail end of his career?
Yeah, like I don't know if it would really when we're talking about the biggest upsets in the sport, I don't think it would be in that conversation. Dustin
No.
Poirier is an all-time great fighter in his own right, so I don't think it would really qualify. But he was certainly a huge underdog here, rightfully so. Everyone knew that this would be a very tough stylistic matchup for him, and I do think he actually put up a much better fight than was expected from a lot of people as well, especially if you compare it to his fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov.
What would you have thought would be a more improbable, Dustin Poirier pulling this off, or the Dallas Mavericks defeating the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals?
Get those brooms out, John, because I see a sweep coming, and I think it's not going to be a good night for those in Dallas. Okay.
So, some strategic placing for our viewers out there that are watching the video portion of this. But let's get into UFC 302 from the Prudential Center. They announced an attendance of 17,834 and a gate of $7.25 million. And this had to have been, of all the UFC events, and we're pushing like 700 live events the UFC has produced since 1993. Never under one roof could we state that we had a former president in Donald Trump, to Theo Vaughn, Joey Diaz, The Situation from Jersey Shore, Mark Coleman, Frankie Edgar, influencers galore. I mean, it just felt like the circus came to town and everyone showed up at the Prudential Center.
I love the crowd shots. It's my favorite part of every single card. I want to know who's here. I want to know who the crowd reacts to and who they don't. It's
Isn't it amazing though that outside of Donald Trump, like the fighters tend to dwarf the quote unquote celebrities when it comes to reactions. Like Alex Pereira got as big a reaction as Donald Trump when they showed him. And you go to some of these like football players or actors, and it's like there's an acknowledgement, unless it's a giant superstar. But on Saturday, it's like these fighters are as like Marab got like a giant reaction when they showed him. It's like these are at their core like fight fans who do see like the star fighters as the stars.
I think the MMA and the UFC in particular just does a fantastic job of making their fighters feel like big deals, despite their best efforts, as we may get into later of some of Dana White's comments. But there are people who are like career guys who might fight, as prelim headliners who are perceived as fan favorites and get big reactions to this day. And you see it whenever they pan to the crowd and you get like, I don't know, Joe Lozon gain a bigger reaction than some of your A-list celebrities. It's one of the things I really like about the sport.
Do you think Jim Miller got a comp ticket for UFC 302?
He better have. He better have.
So. Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. We mentioned the odds. Makhachev was coming into this one a minus 600 favorite. Dustin Poirier plus 440 underdog. All intents and purposes, his last opportunity at a UFC championship and competing in his 30th UFC fight going back to 2011. And the fight kicks off where Islam comes out and gets a takedown immediately off of the fence, and he's working in half guard, goes for a Kimura that Poirier rolls from, losing his back in the process, and this just resulted in Makhachev applying a body triangle and Poirier fighting the choke for the rest of this round. Totally dominant from Makhachev throughout the first 5 minutes. And this did allow the broadcasters to have the out throughout the whole night based on the scorecards of any particular fight that's going into the last round. Well, he could be up 2-0. He could also be down 2-0. And you can't even get mad at Rogan or Daniel Cormier because that's a ludicrous analogy, but not totally out of the realm of possibility that we had. That, yeah, Poirier could have won this first round.
We will get into it in the next fight. I don't want to just go off yet, okay?
Yeah, let's save the ammunition for when it's warranted. But the second round, Poirier does a much better job of staving off the takedowns. And he had mentioned drilling wrestling with Mateusz Gamrot at ATT, and that came through more in the second round. One of the things, and this sometimes can influence you as the viewer, is Islam would just land a jab or do something of significance. Crickets. Dustin Poirier just like just throws a punch and this place goes electric. And that was the dynamic we had here. But Islam does land with a combination, presses him against the fence, but got the takedown in the closing seconds. This one more contested on the feet. Third round we go, and a knee lands to the head from Islam, forcing Poirier down to the ground off the fence, and Islam gets to the back. Poirier's got a busted up nose, and Islam goes back to the body triangle, moves to mount, but Poirier manages to escape and gets to his feet. And Makhachev lands with a combination, and Poirier's having issues with his left eye due to a punch. So after 3 rounds, we're heading to the 4th. What is Eric Marcotte's scorecard after 15 minutes?
I have Makhachev up all 3 rounds, 30-27.
Well, we are co-signing on that. We go to the 4th round, and one of my favorite exchanges was John Anik asking Daniel Cormier, did you pick up anything that Khabib was telling Makhachev between rounds? Daniel Cormier, no, he was speaking Russian. Okay, then we'll move on. So there's a combination by Islam, tags him with this clean left hand. For all the flack that Islam gets about striking, I mean, he more than held his own here. Poirier appeared to injure his left leg off a clinch on the fence, and he confirmed so after the fight that he injured it here. Poirier gets off the fence and he clips Islam with an elbow that cuts him. Best shot of the fight so far for Poirier, and he's delivering body shots. There's an uppercut by Islam, and Poirier goes back to the body. This was Poirier's best round, and maybe this was a round some gave to Poirier. Not enough for me, so I still had Makhachev up 4-0 going into the 5th. And this is when Poirier goes back to the body in round 5, and there's a left that connects and fights off another takedown attempt when Islam shoots for the guillotine, which would have been the most ironic finish to this fight, but then transitions to a Darce choke, and it is locked. And Poirier submits at 2:42 of round number 5. Islam Makhachev retains the lightweight championship. And afterwards, Poirier, you overhear him talking to Islam that he went out here at the end when the Darce was applied and then came back to. And Makhachev retains the championship and is now 15-1 in the UFC. One of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, according to Dana White, but definitely not number 1. So just putting that stamp on things. So your thoughts on Islam Makhachev's performance, and conversely, how you thought Dustin Poirier performed versus expectations after, he's had some very significant submission losses in big fights to Khabib and Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, I thought this was a really entertaining fight, and credit does go to Dustin Poirier for making it so. His takedown defense was very good throughout this fight. Yes, he got taken down quite a few times, but he managed to keep it on the feet long enough to make things interesting. With that being said, Islam Makhachev was clearly the better fighter here. I mean, I thought this was a fantastic performance from him. Not a flawless one. He did get cracked a couple times, but still, like you mentioned, the flack he gets about his striking, I think we're beyond that at this point. This is a guy who's shown that he can strike with our best strikers in the division.
I think a lot of that is kind of just extrapolated from that was a criticism that Khabib faced.
Yeah.
And I think people just kind of view these two as so similar when there's a lot of big differences.
They're very
between
different
these two.
fighters.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Islam Makhachev is at best a much better striker. You saw that when he dropped Charles Oliveira, when he knocked out Alexander Volkanovski, and now here he is beating Dustin Poirier on the feet. He's going to be a very hard fighter to beat. Like, he's never going to be the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world as long as John Jones is still breathing, of course. But
what if he moves up to heavyweight and beats Cyril Gahn?
well, that would cement it, but only if it's his only fight in like 5 years. If he's too active, I just don't see it.
Well, Makhachev is not looking to move up to heavyweight, but he does want to fight for the welterweight championship and looking out for the winner of Leon Edwards and Bilal Muhammad. There's also, you could tell from Dana White, he is positioning Arman Sarukian as the next contender at 155 pounds. And then there's also the wild card. Could Adriano Martins work his way into a title fight to the man who owns that 1L over Islam Makhachev? He's the Dennis Hallman to Matt Hughes.
That would be a very like Anderson Silva 8th title defense sort of vibe, wouldn't it? It's tough to predict what his next move will be. I think if Bilal Muhammad defeats Leon Edwards, for example, I don't see that fight coming together because UFC will never put Bilal Muhammad in such a big fight. So, but if Leon Edwards does retain, it wouldn't shock me if they go in that direction. the Arman Tsarukyan rematch is probably the most appealing one for me, but I can see how that wouldn't appeal as much to Islam, who's already beat him.
Yeah, I have more optimism about the Tsarukyan fight after Islam was so adamant that that fight makes no sense, that I'm thinking that's only going to embolden them to make that one. So we will see what is next. It was a great performance by Islam Makhachev, and not to overlook the fact that Dustin Poirier, going into this fight, he had been wavering on retirement. After the fight, not 100% confirming it, but acknowledging to Joe Rogan this might be it, and even gave kind of a farewell speech at the end here. I really question for a Dustin Poirier that it's not to say that there could be some wild situation where there's an injury and he gets plugged in and could get another title fight, but this man is financially secure. He has cemented his legacy minus a championship, that I think this is as opportune a time to move on to a post-fight career. But we'll see what happens. I guess he did not want to make a concrete decision right after this loss, and I was expecting it. I thought, win or lose, there was a pretty solid chance we might get the retirement speech, and we kind of did.
No one ever retires, John. We'll see him again soon.
Well, I'm looking forward to him fighting Nick Diaz in a decade.
Oh God.
UFC 400, Dustin Poirier, Nick Diaz. Okay,
I can see it.
In a slap fight.
Money, take my money.
How many slap fight promos did we get on this card?
Too many.
You know, we got a question on Rewind to SmackDown about TKO and what we can expect if there's still like the joining of these companies. If you're a WWE fan and just strictly watch WWE and have not watched UFC, you don't have to watch a card, much less this entire one for 7 hours. But just go take a snapshot of this mat and the surrounding inventory and how they have splashed logos. Like, there's a moment that you and I are kind of just numb to the amount of logo overload that we get on this. But I just sat back and I looked at this and I'm like, this is like if my child just like got a bunch of paint and threw it on a white wall, that it's just like, I don't know what this is. It's just logo after logo after logo. I've got fans' names going around the perimeter of the center of the octagon. It's just like anything we can fit. And this is what to expect. This will be a WWE ring in 2 years' time flat.
This is the future of pro wrestling. Look at that UFC mat right now and just ingrain it in your mind, because you will be seeing that on WWE canvases soon enough.
Just wait till Braun Strowman has like goldenpalace.com on his back.
And the beautiful golden gloves that are peeling off.
Yes, yeah. What did you think of Dustin Poirier's shorts?
I love Dustin Poirier's shorts. These like individualized fighter shorts are the best thing that's happened since they did the Reebok deal like a decade ago. They need to start coming out with more of these. They're gonna sell more. It adds more personality to the fighters. It doesn't take away from the professional vibe that they wanted when they switched away from like your old Condom Depot shorts. I think it's great.
So that wraps up our UFC 302 review, everyone. It was a one fight card. I mean, a bit of a departure from usual standard. Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. We had 11 other fights and 9 decisions to go. We're going to keep these concise because some of these fights are just self-contained, to say the least. Sean Strickland and Paulo Costa had a 5-round contest. Why? I can't exactly tell you. I wasn't in there. Believe me, there are some situations that warrant 5-round non-title fights. Was this one of them? I would argue no. Sean Strickland has listen, I thought his strategy was very sound in this fight. It's also one that I guess leaves it to interpretation if some judges are watching it with a different perspective of what they are valuing. But for Paulo Costa, it was amazing to watch this man basically tire himself out, backing up so frequently throughout the first half of this fight. And Strickland is like the calmest fighter, just walking him down, and he is absorbing a lot of leg kicks early. And if there's one thing that you want the broadcasters to harp on, if you show redness on your skin, dead on target, and they will focus on that. Look at the redness, and that is bullseye for them to break down how effective these strikes are.
We were 25 seconds into the first round of this fight, and Paulo Costa kicks the leg of Sean Strickland, and all you hear is, That leg's compromised.
Compromise. That was it. Compromised. I was like, we are 30 seconds in. No, there has not even been a negotiation, much less a compromise. But yeah, I wrote that down too. So, yeah, Costa is heavy on the leg kicks, but I mean, again, it's Strickland who are just these knacking push kicks to the stomach that are just nonstop, and he's so fresh between rounds. Like, whatever you want to say about Sean Strickland and his demeanor publicly, inside of a fight, it's a different person. Like, this guy is almost like Zen-like in terms of like he doesn't register anything. There is no animation from him. He is just locked in, and Costa here is just like he's running a marathon in comparison. It's almost like there's two different athletic events going on between the two. Second round, Costa's going with more leg kicks, and there were a significant amount. By the way, we're going to talk about other fights in terms of control time on the ground, which some fighters won via. Costa had a second of control time on the ground, which was 1 second more than Sean Strickland had throughout these 25 minutes.
Yeah, that's a difference maker.
1 second of control time. Amazing. So it's Strickland stuns him with a jab in the last 30 seconds. He's also mixing a jab with a right combination. Into the third we go, and Costa's going after the body, and Strickland checks a leg kick, and this definitely hurts Costa as he's reacting. Strickland continues walking him down. Costa just could not back up further. This is one time where we used to get that stat I think it was the Fox days of like, distance traveled in a fight, and it would be just something ridiculous, like 16 miles traveled in this fight. I'm like, why is this a stat? What does this matter? I was very curious to see how much distance Costa moved backward in this fight. That would have been an interesting stat to have.
The PFL smart cage would have kept track of it. Okay.
Yeah. This is just the average Joe cage that the UFC competes in. They don't have the intellect level of the PFL cage. So Strickland, I have Strickland up 3 rounds. I assume you were up 3-0 Costa? Which one judge was, by the the way. One judge had
yes.
One judge had it 4-0 going into the 5th. Okay, we digress. We'll get to that.
We'll get to it.
Strickland is landing with jabs in the 4th, and Costa hits a side kick and then goes to the body. This was Costa's best round. Didn't mean he won the round for me, as I had a 4-0 for Strickland after 4. In the 5th, Costa is a lot more active. He definitely picked up. This was the opposite of what I anticipated. I thought we were going to get the best of Costa in the first 2 to 3 rounds, and he would be exhausted. Instead, he was exhausted in the first half of this fight, and then the last 2 rounds I thought were his most effective. He's landing jabs, and then Strickland just picks up the pace in this final minute, and it's the most action of this entire fight. As he lands, there's a right hand for Costa, and Strickland just attacks him with these pair of head kicks and unloads everything he's got. And to me, Costa was winning this round until he wasn't in this final 30-second stretch. I went 50-45 for Sean Strickland. I think at best, you've got a round for Costa. But the scores were... And I literally thought this was a Bruce Buffer just read it wrong. 50-45. The first card he reads is 49-46 for Costa, and I could not believe it. And Sean Strickland's reaction echoed mine, and then a 49-46. Sean Strickland gets the split decision win, and your card, Eric.
50-45 Strickland. 49-46 Paulo Costa. Listen, we were talking about it earlier. At the end of the 5th round, the commentators were doing the whole thing that they do over and over. Oh, you never know about the scoring. You don't know what they're thinking. And I was making fun of them, as I do. And then I heard that first scorecard get turned in, and I realized I was wrong. Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier were right. This was an all-time bad scorecard. I do not know how you possibly see the first 4 rounds of this fight for Paulo Costa, including round 3, which wasn't competitive. I mean, rounds 1, 2, 4, and 5, they were clear but competitive. Round 3 was not competitive. Paulo Costa didn't do anything. He just got beat up. This was an abysmal scorecard, one that will be remembered for a very long time, I think. I know Sean Strickland's fight style has... Like he's been in a lot of split decisions at this point because he doesn't throw with a lot of power, and that doesn't always go well for the judges. But it wasn't as though Paulo Costa was responding with powerful shots either. He hit Sean Strickland in the face like 10 times. Yeah, no, all-time bad scorecard and a really dull fight.
So the judge that had the card for Paulo Costa was Dave Torelli, and this is not this is a judge that's been around for a minute. So like I went through on MMA decisions, like his history here. And to put this into perspective, in the last 2 years combined, he put in 2 dissenting scorecards. In one night, he put in 2 on Saturday. And just going through that, and having a dissenting scorecard is not in and of itself an indictment. There are times that we do see bad decisions, and there's one judge that does have the more accurate read of the fight. Dave Torelli, I don't view as a bad judge, just going through a lot of the cards that he turns in. I chalked this up to a bad night, but it was astounding, this one. And I'm not always a fan of like piling on somebody, but this was a card that you do have to answer to. And I know in the next couple of days, we're going to get, Sean Strickland's got a really tough style. He leaves himself open for this. So like this is the highest level of mixed martial arts that should have judges that are they should be so far ahead of what the viewing public is seeing that this should not be happening, that you have to be able to defend a 4-1 card for Paulo Costa that is just so egregious that I would venture to get. I don't know if there's one other human watching this card that watched this fight that would have been in agreement with Dave Torelli. And if that's the case, then you have to at least have a defense of 4 rounds to 1 for Paulo Costa.
Paulo Costa's corner man, maybe. That's the best I can do. No.
I don't even think they did, because after 3 rounds, they said Costa was down 2-1. They had a round for him. I'm like, you guys are crazy if you think Costa is only down by 1 round, because I had it 3-0. So not even the corner had 4-1, much less 3-0 after 3 rounds, which Dave Torelli had.
Costa did like some good work throughout the fight. His leg kicks were good. He threw some good shots to the body. I thought if he had a case for winning a round, it was round 5 where he outperformed Strickland for the first 4.5 minutes. So I could see that round in his favor, but I didn't think there was much of a case for him to win this fight at all. This was it was a bad fight, a bad scorecard, not a great outing for Paulo Costa. I gave him more of a chance going into this fight than some people did. I thought that his pressure might be a problem for Strickland, but it was Strickland who was just able to invoke his typical game plan, press forward, throw that jab, those straight rights, and it was a typical Sean Strickland fight from the first minute to the last.
Do you feel this solidifies Sean Strickland fighting Dricus du Plessis next for a rematch?
I think that's most likely. If Israel Adesanya is healthy and good to go, it wouldn't surprise me if he cuts the line and gets that first shot at Dricus du Plessis. But if he's still out for the time being, then yeah, they'll go with Sean Strickland. There isn't really a lot of options at middleweight.
And Sean Strickland voicing his support for Donald Trump afterwards. A travesty what they are doing to you, he stated. We then go to the middleweight division. Kevin Holland against Michal Oleksiejczuk. And this was a rare finish on this particular card, as one thing, and this was throughout the card, man, we got so many of the USA chants for an American fighter versus a foreign fighter. And I know for a fact that there was way back in the day, if you remember UFC 58, and they did the Canada versus USA theme. I think Eric was born a week after this card happened. It was the first George St. Pierre, BJ Penn fight among them, and Rich Franklin, David Loiseau. So they billed it as USA versus Canada. And I remember interviewing Dana White in person right after this was announced. And I'm just expecting Dana White to be in full promoter mode and asking him about doing something like country versus country. And he just tells me, I hate it. I hate this idea. I was overruled on this one. We're all fighters. It doesn't matter at all what your nationality is. And I think about this during this fight. And throughout the night, we're just getting USA, beat the foreigner. It was like Madison Square Garden in like 1984 that you were watching this with Hulk Hogan against the Freddie Blassie's heel of the month.
Yeah, I mean, that's really how it is in every country, isn't it? Like, you go to Brazil, they're chanting, yeah, we hope you die or whatever at the opponents. I mean, your fans will always cheer on the people from their country. It's Dana's best efforts aren't going to fix that one, I don't think.
Oleksiejczuk dropped him with a left hand, and he's following with hammer fist, but leaves his arm open that Holland jumps on for an armbar. And Oleksiejczuk tries to roll, and in doing so, just like gift wraps this arm into a better position. And Holland has this thing on locked. The announcers are yelling that the arm's broken. Herb Dean ends it, and Oleksiejczuk is furious by this stoppage at a minute 34 of the first round. What did you think about the finish here? Were you team Oleksiejczuk or team preserve this man's arm?
There is no team Oleksiejczuk here. There's no case for it. If a limb breaks, that's the end of the fight. You don't have to tap. I don't know how many fighters are familiar with that rule, but a referee can stop it at that point. So
till the death, Eric. Till the death.
I sympathize for him. He's very tough, no doubt about it. But unfortunately, he had no case here. His arm got snapped in half. That's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's arm might be wrecked. If you remember, like Miesha Tate was in the first fight with Ronda Rousey. I mean, just would not tap, and she did tons of damage to her arm as a result of that, and had to take some significant time off. Like, there's a ton of adrenaline in these situations, and after the fact, like if you remember, they brought up the very famous arm break with Tim Sylvia and Frank Mir, and Tim Sylvia wanted to keep going. He wanted the fight to continue. It's like, dude, your arm literally snapped, and everyone in the moment, I remember that watching live, everyone got on Herb Dean, and then they saw the replay, were like, oh, my bad.
And every fighter wants to be John Jones against Vitor Belfort or Tony Ferguson against Charles Oliveira and have like that brutal injury and for the fight to just keep going. But more often than not, you're just going to take years off your career.
So since 2018, Kevin Holland has now fought 22 times in the UFC, which is insane. Insane. 6 years, 22 fights in the UFC. So I like this guy to put that in the perspective. He came in 7 years after Dustin Poirier, and he is within 7 fights of what Dustin Poirier is at.
The all-time record for most fights will be his by the time all
next year.
Yeah.
Then we go to Niko Price, Alex Morono. Alex Morono had a great first round. He crucifixed him, was working for an omoplata, and he's got a very bizarre style of stand-up where, I mean, he's first of all, he looks like Jeremy Horn's offspring, and he just looks so unconventional with his stand-up that you don't know if this guy's been rocked or if that's just the way his stance goes. But anyway, Price gets him into his guard. They move to their feet. Spinning wheel kick is landed by Morono, and Morono wins the round, in my opinion. But his corner informs him, settle the fuck down, clean it the fuck up. And that was his advice as Niko Price came back at the second and third and won this fight. Price is landing with strikes. Morono, whatever it was, this dude was aghast in the second and even more so in the third, to the point Joe Rogan said it's rare to see a professional like Morono look this gassed. Price won rounds 2 and 3, and the judges were all in unison here. 29-28 scorecards. Niko Price getting the win. When you have two guys with a combined 3 no contests, including against each other when Niko Price popped for marijuana in 2017, we did get a winner here, pending drug test results.
Yeah, there's still time, John. Don't get ahead of yourself. Listen, when you recap the fight, or if you were to just to read like a written play-by-play, it would sound like this was a really entertaining fight. And going into this, I thought it would be, but this was a tough one for me to get through. Probably the toughest one of the entire card. They just looked like they were fighting underwater. It was so slow. This was a rough 15 minutes as a viewer.
Well, they did know Niko Price, he's got to keep winning because he's got about 6 kids to support, which is a weird storyline for a gigantic organization.
Very true, though.
Yeah. Update on the antitrust lawsuit. Yeah. No changes.
Here's your $500, motherfucker.
Yeah, anyway. But then there's all that sponsorship money that's coming from these logos, right? What's their percentage? I forgot. Randy Brown against Elizeu, Zaleski, Dos Santos opened up the pay-per-view maker. Man, I'm reliving this card now, and it's just like we're only at
sorry.
The end. Could this card have would the Apex have just crumbled with this card underneath it? Could you have imagined watching this in the Apex?
Yes, because I felt like I was watching an Apex card until the main events, like UFC Apex, Strickland versus Costa. That totally sounds like a thing. Okay.
Yeah. there were so many like referee judges discretions that there were some I've just totally glossed over as I'm now going through my notes. In the beginning of this, Dos Santos gets poked in the eye twice, and referee Gasper Oliver acknowledges this, and he like stops the action and then immediately restarts it. I can't. Usually it's Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier that lose their mind. This time it was John Anik who was like, "This is insane," and he just couldn't believe that Dos Santos was not given any time to recover from these blatant eye pokes. That the referee he didn't miss them. He acknowledged there was an eye poke. He was just giving no time to recover. So in between rounds, Jason Herzog, who is cage side, goes in and tells Gasper Oliver, "Hey Gasper, quit doing that. That's not good." This was amazing, dude. Like, this was just, there were some comedy of errors on this card. It was amazing. And by the way, folks, 2 eye pokes, new gloves, just a stellar night 1 data point for us. So Brown wins the first round. He rocks him with a knee at the end of the round that if the eye pokes didn't damage Dos Santos enough, this knee almost sent his head into the lap of Joey Diaz. The second round, Dos Santos stuns him with a right hand and gets to the back, applies a body triangle, and Brown escapes in the final 30 seconds, gets on to the back. This was actually an incredible final 30 seconds for Randy Brown to get out of this back position, take the back, applies a choke, and is landing elbows. Almost enough, but I still gave the round to Dos Santos. And then in the third, we get a third eye poke by Randy Brown with the new gloves. He denied that he poked him. We got Joe Rogan with his Zapruder film breakdown of, yeah, he poked him. It doesn't seem that bad. And at this point, Joe Rogan says, yeah, I don't know about these new gloves. So ringing endorsement on night 1, I've got to say. Cormier reminds us that earlier in the night, we got a split decision. This was the Roman Kopylov fight. And you see, Daniel Cormier explains he was in the bathroom when the decision was read. So now it's his chance to vent about that decision that he thought was ludicrous. I was waiting for like the theme for Curb Your Enthusiasm to start at any point during some of this commentary. Brown wins the third. He gets a 29-28 decision, and he wants to fight Jeff Neal next to get into the top 15. Just a fight full of fouls. There was a fence grab in terms of this, like just setting the record here for amount of fouls in one round that we got.
Oh yeah, this was just something else entirely. I mean, there's so many fouls here that were uncalled. Randy Brown, he got away with a couple here. Zaleski, Dos Santos. I mean, the first thing I have in my notes here is as this man is walking to the octagon, I think it's either Anik or Rogan, and this young kid, Zaleski Dos Santos, is like 38 years old. He's been in this company for a decade. It's I don't know. I think his best years are behind him, and you see that in his
he's 37 years old. This youngster, Carlos Colon.
Best years far behind him. It was an okay fight. The second round was very entertaining. On the glove
in between fouls, there was a bit of a fight here.
There was on occasion on the glove front. If I'm going to give Joe Rogan some credit here, is that he actually did call attention to the faults in these new gloves, because all I could think about is if this was a Bellator or a PFL show and they were introducing new gloves, the only thing we would get from the first preliminary fight to the main event would just be Big John or Randy Couture or whoever talking about how great these gloves are, how they are revolutionizing our sport for like 7 hours. So I'm glad we didn't have to pretend that these are the greatest things that have ever came out of the mind of Dana White.
Yeah, I don't know. This was not a. We will see over time if these gloves are effective, but night 1 certainly couldn't give you a whole lot of confidence. And Sean Strickland just totally destroyed these gloves earlier in the week as well. So there was concern among the fighters, but I mean, they don't get any kind of say in this. It's like, this is how the sport operates. We're going to make a decision, and this is it. There's no negotiating here. There's no representation for the fighters to have any kind of say in this. Like, we could come up tomorrow and say, hey, we're going to compete with boxing gloves next month just for fun, and they'd be like, okay, that's the decision.
And they could never unionize, because then Sam Alvey would never have a chance to be the next Conor McGregor. So this is how things are.
Listen, in fairness to Sam Alvey, these fighters are extremely overpaid. Okay, they should be actually kicking back some. Okay, like think of these executives at TKO.
I think I heard Charles Jourdain say that exact thing on Twitter the other day. So that's what we're dealing with here.
I am sure that these fighters that are all going to be getting some kind of a settlement from this, they will return that money, of course, right?
Rightfully so. Those
Okay.
crooks.
Let's go to the prelim portion. Roman Kopylov against César Almeida. Almeida, a 5-0 fighter that had a 47-8-1 kickboxing record, including a win over Alex Pereira. I was stunned because I thought this would be the Joe Rogan tunnel vision stat that he would just harp on, that this guy beat Alex Pereira, and that would be the whole dominant narrative. I don't think it was brought up once here. I was stunned. So the first round, Kopylov lands with a big left hand. He's very quick with his hands, and Almeida eats a pair of rights on his way up back to his feet, and it's just Kopylov realizing that I could stand with this guy and it's a 50-50 fight, or I could just take him down and this crowd will be totally disengaged from this fight. Right on the second part of that point. Second round, Almeida stops the takedown, landing a body shot, but Kopylov presses him against the fence. He is now 3 for 6 on takedowns by the end of the second. And into the third, Almeida is timing his strikes a lot better. He's having some success, so Kopylov just shuts him down and gets on top. Herb Dean has had enough of this, so with 90 seconds left, he has stood up. That was the biggest reaction from this crowd. He gets another takedown just to deflate the balloon, and Kopylov stands at the end, kicks at the legs, and gets another takedown to just ride out the round. Split decision win for Roman Kopylov. Yes, split decision win. 30-27, 29-28, and yes, Judge, let's not get it right here. This was Chris Lee who had it 29-28 for César Almeida. I had it 30-27 for Kopylov. I don't know what your scoring was.
As did I. 30-27 Kopylov. He was just quicker. He mixed in his grappling well. I thought this was a rather clear 30-27. Others disagree.
Yeah, I like Roman Kopylov a lot. I don't think this was the most entertaining fight, to put it mildly, but I really like his style, and I'm curious to see what kind of opponent he gets next. This one was, I mean, César Almeida he always has that kind of mystique about this undefeated former kickboxer, but this was a reality of fighting someone with wrestling, and it was a big problem for César Almeida. Jailton Almeida, coming off that knockout loss to Curtis Blades at UFC 299, taking on Alexander Romanov. And Alexander Romanov is the avatar for the Eric Marcotte heavyweight special. That, yeah, you could get a quick ending. You could also get 25 minutes if this guy ever headlined a Apex card.
Oh, God.
But not so. This was the first finish of the whole card as Jailton Almeida gets a body lock takedown, and he's got the back. And Romanov is... to say he was a fish out of water would be an apt description, because he has lost his back, and Almeida was very calm and just eventually got in the rear naked choke, and the tap comes at 2:27 of round one. So Jailton Almeida, if you're ranked 7th at heavyweight and you get a quick stoppage, you're going to headline a fight night card next.
No doubt about it. Romanov is a fighter who, like, on his way up, I thought he might climb a bit higher than he has. I think he's hit his ceiling. Although, with that being said, most of these heavyweights don't hit their prime until they're like 46, so there's still time. Almeida, he's something special. He's able to just throw guys around, no matter their wrestling pedigree, no matter how much bigger they are than him. Even that loss against Curtis Blades, he was just throwing Blades around with ease until he committed too much to a single leg. If he works on his striking and defense a bit, I don't know what his ceiling is. I still, whenever I look at him, I always think, why isn't this guy fighting at light heavyweight? But I guess he doesn't like the weight cut, and it's not like heavyweight's the deepest division either. So there's certainly a lot of potential for him.
What did you think about his post-fight Valentina Shevchenko dance?
He's immensely skilled. He doesn't even have to be a fighter. He can just go be a dancer.
Grant Dawson against Joe Solecki. At what point of this fight were you considering just texting me and canceling the rest of your night to do better things?
About 3 minutes into the first round.
This man, I could go through this whole fight. This is the synopsis, okay? Grant Dawson won with 13 minutes and 46 seconds of control time in a 15-minute fight, okay? The only really curious round I would like to ask you about is the first round. Dawson outstruck him by an enormous amount. 34 significant strikes landed to 6 for Joe Solecki. However, Joe Solecki was off his back, sliced him open with an elbow, which to me was the only meaningful strike. I still gave this one to Dawson. Did you see any argument for a Joe Solecki first round?
I did not.
Okay, well, there goes our next 10 minutes of discussion here. We go to the second round, and dude, like the second and third, Dawson took him down with ease. Solecki, like, pretty much just played his part here. He jumps for a guillotine in the third round, putting himself right back on his back. I was like, what is the game plan here? Like, this guillotine slips right off, and now you're on your back underneath this machine that has just dominated you for this entire fight. So Grant Dawson gets the unanimous decision win, 30-27 twice, 29-28 card from who had the first round. It was Joe Billick, a local New Jersey judge, who gave the first round to Joe Solecki. Grant Dawson wins. Dominant performance, but certainly not an entertaining one.
There was a lot of that going around.
We're going to continue. Phil Rowe against Jake Matthews opened up the televised prelims. Phil Rowe winning the first round after he busts open Jake Matthews' nose. His jabs were on point here. And then Matthews got very aggressive towards the end, and he took that into the second, throwing a lot of bigger strikes, stunned Phil Rowe in the second, and enters with continued jabs. Rowe just not doing a whole lot. He was stationary and just reacting to the jabs. In the third, Rowe shoots for a takedown. Matthews shuts it down, gets a reversal into half guard, and he's on top, threatens with an arm triangle, and then fails at an attempt for a choke, but was the better grappler in round number 3. Jake Matthews wins by unanimous decision, 30-27, 29-28 twice, and Jake Matthews is now 29 years old, and this guy in his 20th fight in the UFC. When this guy debuted, he looked like David Finlay when he debuted in New Japan, that you are wondering if this kid is still in high school.
And he's very much current day David Finlay now. It's been a long journey for Jake Matthews. I don't think he reached the heights that were expected of him at one point, but he definitely has his place in the division. He's a solid fighter, and this was one of his better performances in recent memory, I thought.
It was a good turnaround after, Rowe seemed to come out with a good game plan, and his jabs were on point, but Matthews adjusted and Phil Rowe didn't. That was somewhat the synopsis of this one. And then the early prelims, the first 90 minutes of this 7+ hour card. Mickey Gall against Bassil Hafez. Bassil Hafez was striking as though this guy owed him money. He was loading up on every single shot that I thought this guy would be gassed after 5 minutes. He was throwing with everything. Gall stunned him with a right hand at the end of the first. Then Hafez in the second round is taken down, but gets up very quickly. Gall with a right hand off of a double jab. Hafez gets his own takedown. And then in the third, it's Gall landing with a combination, stuns Hafez, and he backs off, nearly goes down from this shot. And then as Hafez shoots in, nearly gets caught in a guillotine. Gall connects with several more strikes and swings without connecting. So Hafez takes him down in the final 30 seconds. Bassil Hafez gets the unanimous nod, 30-27 twice, 29-28 from one judge. I scored this 29-28 for Hafez. Did you see a different outcome?
I had 30-27 for Hafez. I just thought he was really putting a beating on Mickey Gall here. It was an entertaining fight, actually. One of the better ones of this card. Gall has improved immensely from when he debuted a few years ago. He's a much better striker now, and he showcased a pretty solid chin here. Hurt Hafez at one point. It was a good fight, but with that being said, Hafez was just he kind of steamrolled him at points here.
Yeah, Bassil Hafez made his UFC debut last July, and he got Jack Della Maddalena in his UFC debut.
It's a rough one.
And went 3 rounds with Jack Della Maddalena. So, I mean, he had a full camp for this one, and I think he's someone at least of note to watch, the fact that he went 15 minutes with someone the quality of Jack Della Maddalena. Joselyne Edwards versus Ailín Pérez. I mean, this feels like this happened a week ago. I'm not kidding. This was our second decision of the night. We had Pérez landing multiple hip throws. This first round, it was super entertaining, but it was also like there was no defense from either of these women. Like, they were just reversing as though like these were 2 white belts having their first grappling practice. Like, there was no blocking. There was no positional control. It was just back and forth. Pérez gets a throw off of the cage, lands 3 takedowns. Into the second, Edwards lands with a counter right at the beginning, and Pérez just walks into a guillotine. Edwards takes her down, lets go of the guillotine while in half guard, and there's an accidental headbutt by Edwards while on top as they get checked on. Pérez drops her with a spinning back fist and then goes for the armbar, losing it at the end of the round. Into the third, our latest hip toss. Both get back up, and it's Edwards with a series of kicks before moving on to leg kicks and executes a takedown. Close round in the third. Ailín Pérez wins by unanimous decision, 30-27, 29-28, 29-28.
29-28.
And then the opener. Let's not bury this this fight, because this was a sign of things to come with a decision with Andre Lima against Mitch Raposo. That I swear was my fourth grade teacher. I had a Mr. Raposo in grade 4. Andre Lima infamously bit in his last fight in the arm, got a bonus for it, and then got a tattoo of the bite mark on his arm. Comes back in this one and missed weight by a cool 4 pounds.
Impressive, honestly.
I mean, don't miss by an inch, miss by a mile.
Yeah.
That was the thinking here. Lima wins the first round with calf kicks and attacking the right leg, and was getting into the double digits of leg kicks just in the opening 5 minutes. In the second, Lima's positioned in the center. No takedown attempts here by Raposo. And there's a hard warning to Andre Lima when he pokes him in the eye. It's like this set the whole table. Eye pokes, bad scoring. Everything was on the table here for what your night was about to be at UFC 302. Raposo complains about another eye poke, and Herb Dean is just like, okay. Raposo gets a takedown finally near the end of the second. This was the one where I think I mixed this up. There was not the fence grab in the Dos Santos fight. This was the fence grab round where we had multiple eye pokes, and then Lima grabs the fence. So the announcers note the guy who missed weight by 4 pounds is also poking this guy in the eye and grabbing the fence as well. So this was quite the round, this second.
If he already missed weight, he did the eye pokes. Like, just commit to being the bad guy at that point. You know, you're gonna face no punishment for any of it. So
hard warning. And then he got another warning, which I guess was I don't know what we go beyond that.
But it resets. So like he had the hard warning, but then he didn't foul for a long enough period, so he just reset to another soft warning.
This is a serious warning. Okay. Round number 3, it's Lima kicking away at the arm. A leg kick drops Raposo momentarily and sees the opening when Raposo is moving to southpaw. 23 leg kicks executed by Andre Lima throughout this fight, and he wins by split decision, 30-27, 30-27, and one judge, local New Jersey official, Brandon. No, I'm kidding. Brandon from
he
New
had
Jersey.
His connections on this card.
No, this was our first Dave Torelli of 2 bizarre cards. 29-28 for Mitch Raposo, and this just set the broadcasters off. They're like, what? Get ready, buckle up, it's UFC 302.
Yeah, I had it 30-27 for Lima. I did not see the case for
I didn't see any round here for Mitch Raposo, much less 2. It was wild.
It's like you said, this was exactly what we were in store for the next 7 hours. A bunch of fouls, a bad fight with a bad decision. So that's UFC 302. Let us never talk about it again.
So the end of the night, they announced fight of the night, to no surprise, Islam Makhachev against Dustin Poirier. What was the second best fight of the night?
The Mickey Gall fight, I guess.
Okay, that tells you where things were. And then performance of the night, Islam Makhachev and Kevin Holland. So Islam Makhachev taking home $100,000 and the title of number 2 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Dana White, he will not hear anyone's name but Jon Jones as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, not just in MMA, in combat sports. And his new analogy is, you put every fighter in a room, Jon Jones is walking out, because he took 3 years off, came back and beat. He somewhat hedged. First, he says the number 1 heavyweight in the world, in reference. I'm like, Cyril Gane? Do you not remember this? We're in a world now where Francis Ngannou doesn't exist. He did somewhat taper that later when he said the number 1 guy in the division, which by technicality, Gane was ranked number 1 when they fought. So we'll give him the out there. But yeah, I mean, he is just on full-fledged Jon Jones, the greatest of all time, which is, you can have that argument. That can be something. But if you are someone that believes Jon Jones is among the greatest fighters of all time, you must be the biggest, you must be so disappointed of what is going to be left on the table when the career of Jon Jones is analyzed, and how much more he could have done in his career. If already you view him at that level, just the amount of time this man has lost in his career, that's going to be a big discussion point. I thought it was with Cain Velasquez when his career was over. It's going to be that times 10 for Jon Jones when we look back and just how this guy got in his way and missed so many big earning years and big fights that he could have been a part of, and could have had this incredible run at heavyweight that could have been years. And it looks like we may be as low as 2 fights that he gets at heavyweight.
Yeah, I think that's mostly the expectation. I don't think he will fight again after he fights Stipe Miocic eventually. Never really got that heavyweight run that people were interested in, but at the end of the day, he won the title. He will likely defend the title, and I think that's enough for people who want to make their case for John Jones being number one.
So I really enjoyed this main event. This was not a great UFC card by any stretch. I mean, they've been on a run of some super cards. This was not one of them. I just thought this was a card riddled with a lot of fouls, not the most entertaining of fights. You can not to say all of these fights were disappointing, but judging this card as a whole, I didn't think this was a great effort put forth.
No, this was a really rough 7 hours. I mean, the main event was very good. I will remember the main event for quite some time, but even after watching it merely about 12 hours ago and recapping it within this last hour, I find my memory of fights on this card just draining from my mind because it was so unmemorable. And I think that was the expectation going into it. When you looked at this card top to bottom, you probably said to yourself, hey, that main event, there's some really big stars in that one. And oh my God, a 5-round Paulo Costa, Sean Strickland fight. It wasn't a great card.
Well, I'm sure we will be getting in about a week or two the Dana White video about how the skeptics of this card nailed it. They were right on point. They were skeptical about this card, and boy, it underwhelmed. You guys nailed it.
He only saves that hatred for a certain UFC pay-per-view that once took place in Calgary.
So UFC has cards every single Saturday this month. Next week, they are at the KFC Yum Center in Louisville, Kentucky, with Jared Cannonier against Nasruddin Imavov, Dustin Jacoby against Dominic Reyes, Raul Rosas Jr. against Ricky Tercios, among the top 3 cards. Then the next week, they are back to the center of the universe, the UFC Apex.
Oh, look at this card.
Alex Perez against Tetsuya Taira in his continued quest in the bantamweight division. Undefeated 15-0 fighter. That is the headliner for that card, along with Timothy Kuamba versus Lucas Almeida. I would click on their records, but neither have Wikipedia pages. So of this main card, we have 10 fighters and 4 Wikipedia pages. If you want to draw a correlation between that, but I will leave that to everyone. June 22nd is their big debut in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, with Robert Whitaker against Hamzat Chimaev and Sergey Pavlovich against Alexander Volkov in the top 2 fights. And then we will be back for UFC 303 at the end of the month. And as we're speaking to you now, on Monday at noon Eastern time, they're doing a big press conference in Dublin with McGregor and Michael Chandler at the 3 Arena in Dublin. But that card goes down Saturday, June 29th, with Conor McGregor's first fight in 3 years against Michael Chandler. Jamal Hill taking on Carlos Ulberg, who is stepping in on short notice for this fight after Khalil Roundtree Jr. Ended up failing getting popped for DHEA by the UFC drug testing policy. And I mean, you go down here. The other really significant fight on this is pairing Ian Machado Gary on a Conor McGregor card that I would imagine in the week they're really going to try and piggyback Ian Machado Gary off of Conor McGregor. He's taking on Michael Venom Page, so that's a intriguing fight. Cub Swanson and Andre Fili could be fun, but I mean, this is being bought and sold on the main event, clearly.
100%. I mean, they've set up some fights on here which look as though they were put together with the intention of creating some good finishes. So I think you'll get a bit more entertainment out of this undercard than the one we had for UFC 302 here. But it's living and dying on the backs of Conor McGregor and to a lesser extent Michael Chandler.
All right. Well, there you go, everyone. UFC 302 is in the books. Eric, I want to thank you for being a great soldier and coming on here, withering this UFC 302 card. You did get a good main event out of it, so that is the positive. And now you can go back and relive those 9 decisions. I know you like to rewatch these cards the day after to get a fuller view of them. So we thank you as always. We miss you, but it's always great to chat with you on our UFC post shows.
Likewise, although I would gladly never talk about this card again. This is one, just talking about it has zapped my energy. I'm ready for a nap.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a future Rewind Away, and we will call on you to rewatch this in a couple of years. I'm sure this will be right at the top.
Don't you dare, viewers. Don't even think about it.
All right. That's going to wrap things up, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We will be back throughout the week. Full schedule is up at postwrestling.com, and that is it for us. Goodbye.